Do you want to unlock the fretboard? So many students I talk to tell me that really one of their goals is just to be able to play across the fretboard with no limitations, creatively free. And today we are going to dive into John Scofield's 2-note per string arpeggio approach. I've just been using it briefly as I've been working on this lesson, and already I've seen a ton of progress, so I know it will help you as well. Real quick, I do want to mention that John Scofield and his trio will be down here in Miami for the Ground Up Music Festival, February 8th and 9th, and you can get 10% off your ticket at any level with the code CHASEGUITAR. I don't get any kickback from this. This is just straight savings to you for checking out my channel. It's gonna be a great time. Bill Frisell will also be there with his group. Eric Gales, they're gonna be playing together with Snarky Puppy. We have a ton of great guitarists there, Mark Lettieri. It's gonna be a great time. I'll be there. Hopefully you will be there as well. So let's dive into the lesson. Okay, so what do I mean by 2-note arpeggios? I'm really talking about using 2 notes per string. And this is really important because a lot of arpeggios we look at have sometimes 2 notes on a string, sometimes 1, and that change can affect how we pick, how our technique goes for this. Now, one thing to understand about John Scofield's playing is his picking approach, which then informs all of the rest of the lines he plays, is much closer to Pat Metheny and not very similar to someone who I talk about a lot, George Benson. And this is because John Scofield is using a lot of 2 notes per string, rarely 4 notes, and when he's doing this, he's doing a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs. So let's look at a line here that will demonstrate this. And this is from his solo on Charlie Chan, and this is over F7 flat 9 sharp 11. Okay, so let's take a look at this first part so you can understand where this 2-note arpeggio part is coming from. We have B natural and E flat. Again, we're playing over F7, so that's the sharp 11 and the flat 7. And then he's finishing this sound with the flat 9, G flat, and the root. He could have continued this, and we'll look at more examples. If we continue this down, you'll see how it really quickly gets us across the fretboard. Right, you could keep doing that, although he's not picking it like I want to. He's doing it pull-offs, right? And then in this case, he just resolves very quickly because it goes to B flat major. So when he hits that E flat, instead of continuing the arpeggio, we resolve, right? So we take this idea and it's something that could continue, but when the harmony changes and he wants to resolve, he has an option to do that. That's really true for any line we're improvising. Okay, let's look at another example. And this is another one still over F7 sharp 11. We're gonna be in this position. Okay, so let's look at this middle part of this first. So we have F, the 3rd, major 3rd, flat 7, and the sharp 11. Right, so this becomes an F7 sharp 11. That kind of sound. This pattern is really our 2-note per string arpeggio. Right, or with pull-offs like he would play it. And again, we can continue that up. We could have started up on this F. In a sense, he's visualizing this 2-note per string path that goes down diagonally. But when we start, I'm sure noticed that the first string just had one of those notes, right? We didn't play 2 notes. So you go, oh, how's that a 2-note arpeggio, Chase? Well, the path he's looking at is 2 notes per string. He's just using one of them, instead of, and the reason you would do that is because in the moment, wanting to land on a certain note on a downbeat or an upbeat, however the line sounds, one of those lines sounds better than the other. And in the moment, that's what he decided. One thing here, just technically that can be a little tricky, is don't roll this first finger, shift. So 3-1, 3-1. All of this should be 3-1, 3rd finger and 1st finger. Okay, let's look at another example. So from here, you might be asking, well, Chase, how do you know he's visualizing it that way? Well, I've analyzed a whole bunch of his transcriptions across a ton of different songs, and he uses this pattern constantly. It's in basically every solo I looked at, he was doing this. And I didn't go into this trying to find this 2-note arpeggio thing. I was just analyzing a whole bunch of his transcriptions, and this is a pattern I saw him use over and over again. So when he's soloing on confirmation, he does this same exact pattern over sharp 11 chords, but just for a different chord. So let's look at that example. So this is over a C7 sharp 11. It's really a 2-5, G minor and C7, but he's just treating it like that C7 sharp 11 the entire time. So in this case, he's anticipating that 5 chord, which he's playing as a sharp 11, which is interesting in its own right. And he's going into that, right? So it's 2, 3, 4. I'm picking it again because that's just my technique, but. So this is that same path that we had for the F7. He's just continuing it further down. So let's look at a longer line now so we can really see, does this approach only apply on single chords, or does he do this as a general way of playing? And I'm saying that he's generally thinking about this kind of 2-note per string approach when he's soloing, almost no matter what. So let's look at an example from Autumn Leaves on this 2-5, where he's playing through this whole 2-5 one line with this sort of 2-note per string idea, with a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Okay, so we have a lot of these 2-note per string pull-offs, right? Over the A minor 7, we're really still just playing over D7. That's just D7 arpeggio, A, C, D, and F sharp. And then here we get to these like very interesting half steps and dissonances that John Scofield's known for. And I think a lot of the reason he's known for doing that, a lot of the reason he uses them, is because it's very useful in the kind of approach he does with these 2 notes per string, these little half steps. Those things go hand in hand. He's making these harmonic choices partly because of what he's doing technically on guitar. The way he's playing this, making these little pull-off choices, makes him play some of these interesting harmonic choices. So over the D7, we have this 3rd to sharp 9. The very common pattern, right? I've talked about it in another Benson lesson. That kind of diminished or melodic minor pattern. And he's focused more on the fact that he's doing this 2-note per string, right? Because then on the next part, he's playing G and F over D7 instead of the F sharp. Doesn't really matter. And then here, he does that good voice leading into the G major. And this one's sort of like a G7 flat 9 leading into G major. He does that pattern in a bunch of things as well. So there are definitely instances when he's not using arpeggios only as 2 notes per string, especially on the ascending side. But when we're looking at these on the descending side, he's using these 2-note arpeggios much more often. Let's look at another example from Autumn Leaves, this time over the minor 2-5, and we'll see how these half-step 2-note per string type of things really factor in to the way he's playing through these changes. Totally different approach than other ways that you would play through these chord changes. So let's look at this first example over a minor 2-5. So it's really interesting because we hear the harmony through that, but he's playing a lot of these just half-step things, right? C sharp and C, G and F sharp, D sharp and D, and then C and B, right? We get that same diminished pattern that we had before for the, but this time over B7. And then another pattern that he does a lot is this kind of, right? We saw that before with the F7 sharp 11, that kind of 3-1 and then shift 3-1. On the C7 we saw it, and now we're seeing it again here for that. So there's a lot of patterns that John Scofield uses in a bunch of different ways. And this really becomes clear once you've studied a lot of his solos. So over this, I would think about it as if it's coming from that position for the F sharp half diminished, leading into the sharp 5. So, right, we have that dissonance of the natural 5 over a minor 7 flat 5 chord. What's good about this is that when you have these little half steps, they basically create their own voice leading. Right? Each of those sounds like it's wanting to go to that next note. So let's look at another minor 2/5 example and just take this idea a little bit further. Okay, so I see this as a variation on what we just did. It's in that same position. He's using this, like, basically playing around this G major triad, but with that little approach, the same little diminished pattern we had before. And so after that diminished pattern, he goes back up, but instead of going down like that, he does another one of his little chromaticisms to resolve now to B instead of resolving down to G. If you want me to talk about these little chromaticisms that he does and how he's approaching those, I can do that in another lesson. We can focus on that. For right now, I'm focused on the arpeggio section of how he's using these 2-note per string type of ideas. So looking at these 2-note arpeggios, we can see how it quickly moves us down in position, but we don't always want to move down in position. Sometimes we want to stay in position. And that's really when Scofield is using some of the other types of arpeggios that have just 1 note per string. When you use just the 1 note per string, like we saw in this last one, then we stay in position instead of moving down. And sometimes you want that because you're already up high and you don't want to move your improvisation down lower. So let's look at an example where we might have used the other 2-note arpeggios, but instead he's using a different type of approach to stay in position. So this lick is over G7 sharp 11. Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's sort of analyze what's going on here in the framework that Scofield would be thinking about here. So if we were using the same 2-note arpeggio approach we did at the beginning over F7 sharp 11, the 2 notes we would be looking at would be the root, the 7th, the sharp 11, and the 3rd. Right? And he's using this within there. He's just expanding upon that idea, especially with this big leap from the 7th to the sharp 11. Really common one he does in these 2-note arpeggios. Right? And that fits perfectly over this G7 sharp 11. So visualize this G7 sharp 11 as you see that lick. So one big issue I know a lot of you guys have is actually putting these ideas into practice. How do you apply what I just showed you into your playing? So I'm going to start a new series within Chase's Guitar Academy called Deeper Dives, and I'll do that right now. What we're going to do is take the ideas and then start to apply them over a chord change in all 5 positions so that you really have a way of practicing these, right? I don't want you to just kind of watch this as infotainment. I want you guys to actually get better on guitar. And so those deeper dives will be within Chase's Guitar Academy. You can check out the one for this lesson by just joining, do a 7-day free trial, check out the lesson. You can get the PDF as well. And hopefully I see you guys at Ground Up. If you guys are watching this after the fact, I'm sure I have a lot of great footage from that show, which will be posted on my channel. So thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Let me know if you want a deeper dive on any of these Scofield ideas, or if you have any questions or comments. Thank you. That sounds like its own song.